So this is really just a quick update on some of the recent activities that we have. I put up the staff slide first just so you can see some pictures of who you're working with around the state. We do have a lot of new faces in the Urban and Community Forestry program, and this does not include all the blank spaces for vacant positions that we're going to be filling in the near future. So that's exciting news as well. Do want to mention in particular that we are going to be adding 2 new regional urban foresters in the Los Angeles area, and we're adding 2 new partnership and equity coordinators to do a better job collaborating with our partners like all of you. I also want to say I really learned a lot this morning from all the presentations. You know, a lot of what I see about what was talked about this morning is in grant reports, and that's not nearly as exciting as the presentations I heard this morning. You guys need to up your game on your grant reports, man. There was some terrific activities. You know, it seems like I've connected just really briefly with a lot of you on these projects, and I heard so much more. You guys are doing some terrific work, so like pat yourself on the back. I'm glad to see that the state's money is being well spent with California's urban forestry nonprofits. All right, getting into the finances, which is not the most important thing. What's more important is what we do with the money. So again, back to how you're taking our money and applying it to action at the local level is what really matters. But everyone wants to know about the money. So here's a couple of updates. Green schoolyards, we just closed proposals on the first ever Green Schoolyards program. So we received 68 proposals requesting $355 million to work on 413 campuses. Big numbers. We have $117 million available to award. That sounded like a lot of money before we started. But to put it in perspective, I mean, that means we're only going to be able to fund about the top third of the proposals that we received. And 413 campuses is only a small portion of the 10,000 K through 12 public schools and countless thousands of nonprofit daycare facilities throughout the state of California. We are talking about California's most vulnerable populations that need greening. In fact, we've found in preliminary work with Green Schoolyards America that school campuses have about half the canopy of the corresponding urban areas. A third of our school campuses have less than 5% tree canopy cover. Most school campuses look like a sea of asphalt. They are exceedingly hot. It is almost intolerable to go out for recess in the late spring or early fall when the weather is really hot. Our children are at a disadvantage trying to just do anything outside because they're in this sea of impervious surface, reflective heat, and you know it's difficult to even think in those conditions. So I'm really happy that we have this initial investment of $117 million. We need to do a lot more. Victoria touched on Inflation Reduction Act from the U.S. Forest Service. I am also thankful that that funding was available to us. Honestly, we put in a much larger proposal than we were allocated. That said, California's allocation of $43.2 million was more than double the second highest state in the nation Texas got about 20 million. Everyone else got less than that. So you all can be proud. We not only have the need, but we have the ability to get the work done where it's needed most. And that's because of a couple of decades of efforts from all of you in this room, that we were able to make such a strong proposal and get more than double what every other state in the nation got from Inflation Reduction Act. As part of this, we are going to be expanding our capacity to provide resources to all of our partners, not only with CAL FIRE staff, but also with key partners like the Arbor Day Foundation, which runs the Tree City, Tree Campus, and Tree Line USA programs. We're going to be expanding those programs so that they're more informative, they are more encouraging, and I have talked with Arbor Day Foundation on a number of occasions, and I'm always amazed at the brand recognition that Tree City USA brings. And, you know, I've been in multiple cities where people have questioned me in public meetings, how can you make this decision? You're a Tree City USA. I'm like, do you know what the requirements of this program are? It's like entry level. But anyway, it has this crazy brand recognition where if we utilize that brand recognition, that marketing engine that is available through the Arbor Day Foundation, we are going to be able to influence change in about 200 municipalities in California, a dozen utilities, which we all know they need some influence to make better choices, with hundreds of campuses throughout the state of California, and we're going to be able to expand those services. So it's a way to do a lot of work really quickly. As part of Inflation Reduction Act, we are also going to provide sub-grants to communities. So we are re-granting the federal funding, and I know Victoria touched on some of the difficulties navigating the federal funding. So what CAL FIRE is bringing to the table is we have offered to provide the match for the federal funding on behalf of all of the applicants. So none of our applicants will have to provide any match. This is all 100% funding to applicants that come through the CAL FIRE process. That does come with some limitations. We will only be working with disadvantaged communities. That's it, 100% of the money to disadvantaged communities, using either the CGS tool that Victoria mentioned or Cal EnviroScreen. CGS was actually constructed using Cal EnviroScreen as a model. So the federal government's willing to accept either, and so we're going to proceed in that way. Some updates on policy. Last year during the legislative session, the legislature recommended and the governor signed a piece of legislation that requires the state to develop a statewide strategic plan to increase canopy cover 10% by 2035. That is a very optimistic goal. That is hundreds of thousands of trees that will need to be planted and hundreds of thousands more that need to be better maintained and for us to extend the longevity on. I do want to remind you about the presentation from Cal Poly where they said that 80% of the urban forest is privately owned. Who do you think is best situated to communicate to those private property owners? The nonprofits. All of you are going to influence that change in 80% of California's urban area. You have a big role to play in this. And so we're going to make sure that we do everything we can to equip you with the resources, technical resources, the financial resources to make progress towards this big goal. I don't know if it's possible, but I'm sure going to give it a try, and I hope all of you will too. So more legislative discussion about green schoolyards. They're talking about extending funding allocations, talking about a statewide strategic plan for green schoolyards. I've seen some other pieces of legislation about green schoolyards. This is a really exciting topic right now, and the legislature loves it. So let's get behind green schoolyards. There's talk about climate bonds, so new funding streams coming our way. Pocket forests are still a topic. That legislation didn't get passed last year, but we put it in our grant guidelines anyway, because it was important to our constituents. So we wanted to make sure that we explicitly said that that was an eligible funding type or an activity. There's talk about a strategic plan for green highways. And Victoria mentioned California climate investments, you know, that they're proposing to increase funding by 200%. I don't know what that is referenced to. You know, I'm hoping it's 200% of what we have right now, but we'll see. There's been executive discussion about base funding for urban and community forestry. So for those of you who don't know, Urban and Community Forestry in California has been operating on different one-time funding sources for the last almost 40 years. We always have new obligations. We're continuously adapting to what the latest funding source is, whether that's the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund or bond funds or federal funds. You know, legislative priorities like green schoolyards. It's always some new goal. There's never been base funding that just says, we have legislation that says we have to have an urban forestry program, so let's make sure that we're giving a minimal level of funding and dedicating a minimal level of staffing to that on an annual basis. So now we're at least talking about it. We were able to insert into the state hazard mitigation plan in the extreme heat chapter a mitigation strategy at the top of the list to plant trees. Who knew? Tree planting, a logical solution to extreme heat. But I mean, it's meaningful that it's in the state hazard mitigation plan, because now that opens the door to acquiring funding from Office of Emergency Services and FEMA. We are strongly focused on diversity, equity, and inclusion. We are going to focus a lot of our efforts on priority populations and disadvantaged communities. For those of you who do not fit that category or are not serving those populations, sorry, but that's the reality. It's the role of government to help those who need the help the most. Resources and tools. Cal Poly did a great job on Urban Forest Ecosystems Institute. The Urban Forest Assessment Tool they mentioned is one of our new projects. I'm hoping that all of you may contribute to a better name, because I hate that acronym. UFAT. Okay, so we need a better name. We need a better name for this tool when we're adding it to the Cal Poly suite of tools that we're all using. So hopefully you can at least contribute to that. I say that in jest, but marketing is an important part of what we do, right? It's the perception of what we're presenting as far as information. Really excited about the work thus far from the California Schoolyard Forest System. We funded that with a direct grant out of our 2021 to 22 funding. They have done some great work on canopy cover assessment, developing a resource library, developing a community of practice. Lots more good work to come, lots more that's needed with green schoolyards. So I'm excited about the work that's happening there. We also funded workforce development in 2021-22, and out of that, we heard from our grant recipients that they would benefit from a workforce development network. So we've gotten together for a couple of meetings to talk about things like recruitment, sharing curriculum, sharing training resources, sharing placement opportunities. And so I'm hoping to expand on that in the future, because we need the urban forestry workforce to represent the population of California that we intend to serve. Jennifer did a great job about some of the urban wood stuff. We are funding some urban wood network videos and training that will be available. So more to come on that soon. We're also funding analysis, theorizing that we can grow more trees without using more water. I don't think it's a big jump in faith. We all know that there have been some trees put in place that are getting overwatered because people are watering lawns in conjunction with their trees. They haven't separated valves. There's a lot of practices that we can put in place so that we can grow more trees without using more water. But we're going to prove it scientifically. We're also going to start an urban forestry camp for the next generation. So we applied for 2 California Climate Fellows to work with CAL FIRE, and that's what they're going to do. They're going to envision what the training needs are, where to host the camp, what kinds of speakers to invite, how long the camp is going to go for. I'm hoping all of you in this room are going to give us some input. The Climate Fellows will be starting this September with CAL FIRE, and we're hoping to deliver the urban forestry camp next summer. So you have 10 or so months to give us all your good ideas on what the training needs are, who do we invite, how do we recruit the right participants, and give them as much as they can get to launch their career in urban forestry. Call to action. 10% increase in canopy cover, we need your help. We need to promote policies in every city in the state for no net loss of canopy. We cannot afford to have cities that are seeing canopy declines. If a tree is removed, we need more than one replacement. We need to promote responsible maintenance, public and private. We need to review and improve ordinances. I know that's not typically the role of nonprofits, but you can advocate for change. You can ask for it. If your ordinance in your city is more than 10 years old, it needs to be looked at again. The open solicitation for Inflation Reduction Act at the national level closes June 1st. So I'm very happy to hear that California Relief is applying and that they intend to subgrant. I know there's some other organizations in the state that intend to do the same. So my challenge to all of the established nonprofits is think about how you can expand your service area, how you can expand your capacity to deliver services, how you can take advantage of this unprecedented opportunity. The federal government's offering $1.5 billion for urban forestry nationally. I want California to get the lion's share of that by far. So all of you think about what's your role? How can we do more? How can we bring more people into the fold to get this work done. Working with schools, and then, you know, partnership and collaboration. What you guys do all the time is what we need to do more of. We're doing a great job right now, but we're a really tiny segment of what happens on a daily basis in our communities. We need to be a much bigger influence. That said, questions? Okay. Was that 15 minutes?
I'm sure there's probably lots of questions for Walter, so where do we want to start?
Thanks, Claire with Amigos de los Rios. Did you mean June 1st, like is in a couple weeks? Like no sleep?
Right. If you're applying to the national notice of funding opportunity, the deadline's June 1st. If you want to wait for the state request for proposals, it'll probably be this fall sometime.
Gotcha. And do you know, oh, I'm so sorry, pardon me.
Yeah, that's a great question. So the state is operating with a smaller amount of money. So if you intend to have a project that's in, you know, multi-million-dollar terms, you should probably apply to the federal government. I have not written the grant guidelines for the state proposal yet, but I suspect we will be somewhere similar to where we have been in the past. So like proposals between 150,000 and 1.5 million. So, you know, if you're applying for something larger than that, you probably need to think about the federal proposal.
Can I just ask, is it going to be subject to NEPA as well as CEQA and also Davis-Bacon wave structure?
I don't think so, but I don't want to speak for the Forest Service.
Okay.
No, you can apply for both. Do not apply for the same project. Yeah, so different activities. We are going to be comparing notes. So, you know, don't like go, oh, well, I have a better chance of getting my project funded if I apply to multiple funding sources, because no, we want to fund distinct projects from different sources.
Walter, so I had a question because we've been looking at this, and my understanding is that nonprofits themselves cannot apply for the federal grant. It has to be something like a municipality, and that you have to have a SAM login. So if you don't have a SAM login already, they told us that it'd take 45 days to get a SAM login. So that, I mean, this is what we've, in our research with our nonprofit and our partnership, because we're trying to get our application and all our ducks in a row to do this.
I don't think that's accurate.
Okay.
Cindy had a comment.
The whole issue about the SAM login, that was brought up in those workshops, but Matt Ritter, who was here earlier, he just started a nonprofit recently, and so he said that he applied for his SAM login and he got it within 48 hours. Now, what that means is you have to have all your ducks lined up as far as your paperwork, and I think it was also said by Miranda that on one of those things that if you do apply for it, the other thing is to call to get your SAMs. So, but that was the other thing that came up that I asked on those workshops was, well, we have a SAMs, we're up to date, et cetera. So if you can't manage to get it in time, when we do pass-through grants, you'll have a little bit more time to get your SAMs login, like go for it now, and we wouldn't, if we got awarded, knock on wood, you know, it would be like later this year that ours would come out. So there's kind of a backfall there. Does that make sense? Oh, yeah, of course you can be a nonprofit, yeah. You don't have to pair with a municipality, no.
So they were telling us that, so this kind of confusing because when we reached out to them directly, because we're trying to find out, because they said you had to pair with the municipality. I'm the municipality end, this is a nonprofit end. But they said we didn't need council resolution, but we need a letter of support from the city manager. You don't have to have a resolution. So if you're in, this is just for everybody else in the group, I'm obviously municipality, but if you don't have a city manager to get a letter of support from to do the program you're applying for, it's like, I think there, you know, I don't understand it. It sounds like there's there's not enough clarity on the process and not enough time, right? I think the problem is this opened up April 12th, which, well, I mean, most grants open up that way, let's be honest. But, you know, it's like the compressed time and the scope that you're going for is huge. So I'm just wondering if you've heard anything to that. Can you just apply and not even have a letter of support?
You know, we don't usually get letters of support from municipalities. We get maybe partners, but I know that normally I have to have a letter for CAL FIRE, I have to have a letter from my board that says I can go for the grant. And I confess, we've been kind of busy with this. And so, like, as somebody said, you know, after this thing, we're going to go hardcore on it. And I was going to look into what kind of a letter of support do we have to have as a nonprofit. But as far as the municipality, I don't know. On the other hand, I will point out, Alicia Sanchez-Scott is in the room, and so she's been listening to all these things, and she works for the U.S. Forest Service, so she might go back and find out some information. So.
You swear that if I don't kill myself to get an application in by June 1st, that I'm going to be able to come back in the fall? You swear?
It looks very, very likely because the state did just approve a budget change proposal to be able to accept the federal allocation. We still need to amend our application, and the same kind of struggles that you're having trying to understand this, state agencies had. So you're not alone. We're still trying to, you know, figure out some of the fine details, but it looks like 95 to 99% that, you know, everything's going to fall into place exactly as planned. We will open up a request for proposals this fall because the Forest Service is requiring to do that within 6 months of funding award. Again, I don't know when that clock starts. I don't know if it started when they announced the allocations or when we submit our narrative. But anyway, we're trying to move very quickly and get the funding out to communities where it can be used.
Thanks for that, Walter. It was a good update, and I learned a lot. First of all, I want to state empirically that I don't want to take anything away from what DACs deserve. But secondly, working statewide, what we see often is the missing middle, which we hear about a lot in terms of, you know, housing, employment for people who serve the community, nurses, cops, firefighters, et cetera. And we see these communities that might just be out of where the DAC percentage is set, or smaller to medium-sized cities that don't have the resources and they never qualify. So I'm wondering at what point we can expand to address our urban forest more in a statewide way than just only DACs. And once again, I do not want to take anything away from what DACs deserve.
I think some of the new funding sources are going to be more closely tied to the Urban Forestry Act, which does allow a lot more discretion. So if we're not beholden to a particular funder like the U.S. Forest Service or a bond fund or greenhouse gas reduction fund, then we have a much broader set of goals that we can use our discretion to determine things like, hey, what does the daytime adjusted population look like for this community as opposed to the people that are answering the census, right? Because there's a difference. There's a big difference in a lot of our communities between those things, especially in our more populated areas, the Bay Area, San Diego, Los Angeles. You know, we have a lot of people coming from priority populations to work in those communities, and so we don't want to neglect them. Yeah, great point, Nancy. Thank you.
Walter, thank you. Thank you so much for all of your leadership. This is really amazing. I guess I want clarification. So CAL FIRE had to pull back, well, CAL FIRE didn't have to, the state took back the normal funding cycle that CAL FIRE was to offer. And what I'm understanding you to say is that the next funding cycle is going to be through the IRA funding. Is there going to be a state-funded CAL FIRE facilitated UCF grant cycle in the near future?
Maybe. It depends on what the legislature and the governor determines with the greenhouse gas reduction fund and whether they decide to sell climate bonds and what those might look like. It also depends if, you know, they can scrape together some amount of general fund for a base funding amount. You know, so I would be speculating, but with so many proposals that are up for consideration, it seems like something's going to happen.
I've got two questions, but they're both quick. One is, what's the timeline that you're looking for grants? I know the federal grant is a 5-year grant period. Is CAL FIRE's, I assume, is going to be shorter because you have to fit within that time period for the IRA funding that you got?
Ours will be slightly shorter, but I'm hoping to get it out the door really quickly because we did have grant guidelines already prepared that we had to withdraw because the state withdrew state general fund dollars that we were going to fund those grants with. So we're just going to make a few modifications to fit the IRA goals and guidelines and try to roll that back out very quickly.
And then my other question is, what's a green highway? I think that's the term you used.
So this is actually something that I worked on when I was a state coordinator for Mississippi. We had a partnership with Department of Transportation to fund tree planting projects, not only along highways, but also along major roads and facilities adjacent to major roads. So we did more tree planting with DOT funds than we did with Urban and Community Forestry funds for 10 years that I was in Mississippi.
All right, well, let's put our hands together one more time for Walter.